We started to get a lot of traction in the baseball space and then quickly into golf. And we have adoption from tens of thousands of individuals aged 8 to 98, including Patrick Mahomes, John Rahm is a regular user, Spencer Tatum is trainers on our advisory board, Justin Verlander, Damian Lillard, Tony Ferguson, basically across all major sports, the list goes on. And this is all organic word of mouth growth. We want to be very cautious about building the brand and the trust we have with customers because there's a lot of noise in this space and a lot of gimmicky stuff. And this is the opposite of that. But you can easily be perceived as a gimmick because of how different it looks.
Hi, this is Steve Young from Gerhardt, Oregon, and I play at the Gerhardt Golf Links. It's the oldest course west of the Mississippi, and this is Golf Smarter number 949.
Unlocking the golfer's athletic potential using Proteus, featuring the founder, Sam Miller.
This is Golf Smarter, sharing stories, tips, and insights from great golf minds to help you lower your score and raise your golf IQ. Here's your host, Fred Green.
Welcome to the Golf Smarter podcast, Sam.
Good to be here, Fred. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you on. This is a fascinating topic. We talk about so many different things on the Golf Smarter podcast, ranging from golf itself to stories to healthcare, right, for the golfer, and talk to a lot of PTs, physical therapists, and exercise experts. And I also like talking to inventors. And when I can combine inventors with physical therapy and exercise, I think we're onto something big. Tell me about Proteus.
Happy to. Most active people struggle with getting results from fitness programs, like performing better in sport or staying pain-free. And one of the primary reasons that we've observed why that is the case is they're not necessarily focusing on the right movements or the methods that meet their specific needs because they don't have the information they need or kind of the right tools. And when that happens, most active people get unmotivated, they waste time, they don't see progress until all of a sudden they quit, get beat, or get injured. And so what Proteus does is we specialize in a fitness technology for commercial gyms and physical therapy clinics to deliver precision fitness, athletic training, and physical therapy services. The reason why kind of so many active people love Proteus is because it's the single most effective way to get targeted, personalized training insights to help you move better, live longer, and perform at your peak. So Proteus is primarily a physical assessment tool that allows you to be able to quantify multi-planar, rotational, and functional movements for specifically around strength and power in a way that has not been possible before in a matter of minutes. Get targeted results to see where you stand, and then hyper-personalized training recommendations. And then secondarily, Proteus doubles as a resistance training tool. So it's a very unique combination of measurement and training. We have 400 partner sites in the US and Canada, 75,000 users that range from age 8 to age 98. And that includes some of the best athletes in the world across all major sports.
That's amazing. That's amazing. When you say it targets training insights, let's flesh that out a little bit more. Tell me more about that.
So we have it's a for a listener that's is not familiar with what Proteus is. It's a hardware system, roughly the size of a treadmill, and then there's a 27-inch touchscreen attached to it. And within the software, we have a library of performance tests. So I'll give you an example. We have one standardized test that's very popular. That's called the general power test, and the screen walks you through a battery of movements from basic uniplanar isolated muscle bicep, tricep to a single leg squat into rotation. That test actually has a jump in it, right? There's all these different combinations of movements, but you basically go through, normal test is about 15 movements, and you do that in 4 to 6 minutes. Which is the equivalent of, we like to say it would take 20 pieces of equipment in a laboratory in 3 hours of time to get 10% of what Proteus does in 5 minutes.
Wow.
And what it then does is it gives you a report. And the report, one of the unique things that we patented is the first ever way to be able to quantify physical strength and power for multi-planar movements and functional movements. So we've taken that capability and rolled it into what's effectively it's almost like a sports science lab in a box, but with this report output that's super easy to understand. And immediately it will tell you, okay, you just did this test of 15 movements, just for example. You select filters of who you want to compare yourself to, what demographic. We have 1 billion data points. We've exceeded 1 billion data points that we've captured. This is new normative data. And you select age, sex, height, weight, sport, position, skill level, if there is one, and contextualizes the results. And it tells you where you stand amongst that compared to that group. What's your biological power age, for example? What's your what percentile are you in for the overall test? And then by movement, where are you deficient? Where are you imbalanced? And then what should you work on? And the what should you work on comes in the form of, do you need to be training strength, power, speed, right? Heavy resistance, light resistance, and what body areas? And so this is, it's kind of a hack for being able to determine, what am I capable of? Where do I stand against my peers? Am I improving? Am I declining? In what ways? And then what do I do about it? And the recommendations are kind of equipment agnostic. So we view Proteus as the data hub that informs how you should be training, what other tools you should be training. And that's how it's used in the field, where people will walk away with these reports. Some of them purchase them. And it will give them that guidance, or they'll give it to their trainer, and that the trainer will use that as the basis of a program. And we've got a new feature of automatic program generation, which I can talk about a little bit later, that's in the pipe.
Okay, we'll talk about it later then.
Well, I can talk about it now if you'd like.
No, we'll talk about it later, because I want to go back to multi-planar movements. Mm-hmm. You're talking about 3D resistance, correct? Is that
correct?
What you mean by multi-planar?
Yeah, well, when we just think about movement, and separate 3D resistance for a second from that, just, okay. I think one of the observations that we've made is that there's been all these advancements in technology that really are focused on these important pillars of human performance. So sleep and recovery, we've got wearables for that, right? We've got cameras for biomechanics. What is the equivalent for physical strength and power? Is it how much you can bench press or squat? Because I would argue, are those really the movements that are really important to measure and quantify as we're trying to profile what you're capable of? The answer is no. Those are just easy, right? And they're important, but they're easy. What really matters, though, is your ability to rotate, right? So that would be a multi-planar movement. You're moving through multiple planes of motion. And when I say functional, right, it's an overused term, but really we view everyone as an athlete, and we move and exist in a three-dimensional space. So when we're trying to quantify or assess somebody's capabilities, especially if you care about golf, which is very much a rotational sport, you really want to be thinking about your ability to generate force and speed and acceleration for rotational movements, and movements that involve moving through multiple planes of motion and involve various muscle groups working together, because that's what's going to translate to the game of golf, for example.
Good, because I want to talk about how this relates to golfers, and we're going to do that in just a moment. How does this relate to golfers? Okay, I can understand that you can target many different types of athletes and see what they want to do, but let's talk about golfers, and then let's talk about the level of golfers. Who specifically we're talking about.
Sure. So one of the things I want to go back to to answer that question is that Proteus is both a performance testing tool and a training tool. And what I want to call out, I think this is a really important point, is that the key invention that we've developed and patented many times over is, and why Proteus has this unique kind of shape and form factor, is we created a new resistance modality, right? So what that looks like is we call it 3D resistance, and it feels like you're moving through a fluid. It's like a force field. It's constant, no matter what speed or direction you move. And this is really important for two reasons. One is that is from a resistance training benefit standpoint, right? So what it does is it's a very low impact on the joints. It's very safe and user controlled. You can perform any conceivable movement on Proteus with no setup. It's just adaptive hardware. And it provides a resistance that you have to overcome throughout an entire range of motion. So, for example, if you were to try to do a multi-planar movement on a cable machine, you would position your body in a certain way relative to the machine, such that you would get this kind of peak resistance that you're encountering at a certain part of your movement. And then at the end ranges, for example, you're encountering a totally different level of resistance. And that's because of the angle of it's a rope, right? A cable. So what we did is we created this rigid arm and mechanical system that we've patented that allows us to provide multi-directional forces simultaneously, which produces feeling of like training underwater. And you can change the viscosity of the fluid. What that does is it stimulates the neuromuscular system and creates a muscle activation that we've proven with one of our research partners, the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York, can produce up to 95% greater peak muscle activation than doing the same movements with a free weight or a cable machine. But it's not to necessarily compete with those things. This is just a tool for priming the neuromuscular system. It's for it has great benefits for the fascial system, coordination, proprioception, and it's the ultimate tool for developing, we say, triplanar power and speed. And as a training tool, it is a tool in your toolbox. And I'll come back to what those benefits are. So when we have guys like, Brendan Todd, got a Proteus, and one of the trainers that he's working with is another client of ours, a guy named Jared Phillips that trained PMT in Southlake, Texas. He's been working with Brendan, and Brendan will almost do a warm up on Proteus, which enables him to. We have documentation and reports of this, an increase of 5 miles per hour in ball speed in 1 day. That's the kind of priming that it does, right? And this is at the time that he right as he snagged second place finish, I think, at the AT&T Pro-Am. And we've got stories on from Revolution Sports in Orlando is another great one. Increasing acceleration, which is translating directly to club head speed, by 50% in 2 months.
Wow.
And so introducing Proteus as one of the training tools in your toolkit, it's not meant to be a replacement for all the training tools that you use, can have extraordinary benefits for, especially around your ability to generate power and acceleration, which ultimately translate directly to, club head speed, ball speed, et cetera. And then there's the testing component, the assessment component. So what Proteus is, so the 3D resistance that I was talking about before, the primary reason we invented this is because if you are trying to measure strength, right, or power. Strength is your ability to move against a force. So if you are trying to evaluate somebody's rotational strength or power, right, you then need to have doing a multi-planar movement. You need multi-planar forces, right? Because it's your ability to overcome force, right, in that range of motion. That's not something that exists, right? As I was explaining about the kind of a cable machine, it's a one-directional resistance. It's not mirroring the direction of your movement. It's not equal throughout the range of motion. It's not actually possible to get a reliable, consistent, or anywhere close to an accurate measurement. That's certainly not repeatable from a cable machine for a multiplanar movement. It's physically impossible. So this constant resistance or constant force that we create allows us to measure strength and power throughout an entire range of motion, like rotation, really for the first time ever, and then do it really efficiently from a time perspective, grouping these different movements together. And so the report outputs will expose things like you have an imbalance between your power and your acceleration, right? So you might have, we see this a lot, that people are focusing on strength improvements for certain movements, when what they actually should be working on is speed. And what Proteus helps you understand is when and what movements. And so, what are the implications, right? So we often see, no matter the demographic we look at, core power is deficient across the board, no matter the demographic, right? We see sagittal plane movements are often overtrained for strength. That's like the up and down, like a squatting type movement, are overtrained or overtraining strength or undertraining speed. So, and those are just general observations, just a couple of them. But the key thing is that this lets you know, what do I need to work on? Where do I stand? What do I need to work on specifically? And that information then is used to inform personalization to someone's training program. And the results of that can be in the form of, we've seen Greg Chalmers is a great story. Greg Chalmers had to take a medical year in 2017 because of back pain. He couldn't finish tournaments. He'd been working on Proteus with, this is again Jared Phillips in South Lake, Texas, at Train PMT. Basically, with this plan, got him out of pain. He went from 106 mile an hour swing speed to 115. Recorded his highest ball speed ever in his career at 174 miles per hour at 50 years old at the, I think it was the Byron Nelson tournament last year. And so there's all these just phenomenal stories like that we love to hear, where it's a huge unlock. The data, what it informs about how you need to be training specifically to really, if you're going to use your time, improving, use it efficiently. Focus on the right areas. Don't just do the, kind of the cookie cutter, well, I need to train strength for these movements. It's just not true. And we've got the data to back it up. It really depends on who you are and your unique characteristics, and Proteus exposes that.
There are so many different types of exercises that people can do that may provide some of the resistance aspects that Proteus can give, but they're not quantifiable. And, I'm thinking about, I swim. Okay, so that all resistance, no impact, zero impact. Same here. And but I think of other things that I'm doing, and it's resistance only in one direction, right? So this is what the huge advantage that this provides, not only the quantifiable and the metrics, but you've got it in all directions. You can do this in one simple move. I mean, you need training, you need a trainer with you until you figure it out. You're accustomed to it. But this is not a consumer product, is it? Yet?
Well, it's not consumer. Consumer is not our focus in the sense that we sell. We're primarily B2B in the sense that we sell our hardware and our software license to to primarily commercial gyms. We have clients that include pro and college sports teams, sports performance gyms, physical therapy, chiropractic, biohacking, mainstream commercial gyms. We have, because we've got 75,000 users and at those locations, though, the consumer kind of product that is being developed right now is a remote training program that you can purchase that is developed automatically for golf specifically after you do a Proteus test in person. So that would be, for example, you go in and take a Proteus test, those results automatically create a hyper-personalized program for you that's delivered through a partner mobile application. And you can follow that program, using tools that you have at home or at a different gym, right? And a 3-month-long program. And some of the results from the beta program that have been in development and with some of our partners have produced extraordinary results. So that's where we're kind of headed with this as our, I guess, first foray into having a consumer product, but it is a digital product that is an extension of after getting it after a 5-minute test in person with Proteus at one of our affiliate partner sites.
I was playing golf yesterday with somebody in his late 20s, and he's just starting to play golf. And this is a kid who in high school, I guess it was, as a late teenager, he started lifting weights. And he's done a lot of that kind of resistance training, just weight training, so to build up his chest and his arms. And it's a glorious thing to see when he pulls off his shirt, which I've known him for a long time, so I've seen him take his shirt off. It's like, wow, okay. But now that he's playing golf, he's recognizing that he's got no flexibility whatsoever. Right?
Pretty common.
Yeah. And he's like, I look great, but I cannot turn my hips at all. Right? He can't get his shoulders around, and he kind of gets stuck and sweeps at the ball. How would Proteus work for someone like that?
Yep. So Proteus is not a tool that was developed for the purpose of beach muscles, right?
Right.
Proteus is the purpose of it is to basically unlock your athletic potential. And the beautiful thing about it is that so that example that you just provided, we see that kind of thing often, especially with high school and college level athletes, which is that's our largest demographic of users. But our fastest growing demographic of users is 30 to 60 year olds.
Okay.
And so, but what we see with the high school and college athletes in particular is whether it's their high school or college, strength program that the whole team is doing or whatever it may be, or something they're doing on their own is very strength oriented, right? Like heavy weight, slow moving reps. And that is a critical foundational piece of the puzzle. You cannot be a great athlete without a foundational strength, right? There's a point in time that is often earlier than most people realize, way earlier, that you need to train along the force velocity curve. So you need to start training at a higher speed with a lighter load, all the way to the kind of extreme ranges where you're training with a very light load at maximum speed. And you need to be training along that curve, right? Mm-hmm. And so what we often see is that there's a overtraining on the foundational strength side, which leaves a complete door open of untapped potential around starting to train power and acceleration, which we're finding are highly, highly predictive of on-field performance. For example, with baseball players, you're finding the same thing with golf and swing speed. We're starting to correlate data with the TrackMan, and it's unbelievably compelling. What it really does, though, from a training standpoint, is it helps you tie individual muscles and isolated movements together into a cohesive movement more efficiently. And how it does that is it kind of one of the things that first-time user on Proteus will experience is we often see someone, you kind of like fall back on your heels or stumble back at first. We literally call this the Proteus stumble. And it's because people that are using it for the first time are not necessarily used to having to engage their entire core and produce force from the ground up to be able to move through against a resistance that's resisting you throughout an entire range of motion. And it always helps people feel better when we tell them that. Like, so Patrick Mahomes has been a user of Proteus for about 2 years. And Proteus is in 3 episodes of the series on Netflix called Quarterback.
Right.
Yeah, we Bobby Stroop, Patrick Mahomes' trainer, is on Proteus' scientific advisory board, and so but Mahomes has been using this for a while. But the first time he ever used Proteus, he literally stumbled back onto his heels. So it helps people feel a little bit better when they're like, okay, but this is just, and then he picked it up like that. We often see it's a very short learning curve, but it forces you to take an athletic stance, produce force from the ground up, to engage your core and your entire body and tie these muscles together to do any movement. And that's one of the beautiful, beautiful things about it.
Well, it's good. I did get a chance to try it out in San Francisco. There's a cute little storefront there, Performance for Golf. And I want to thank those guys for inviting me down and getting a chance to try it. And I, too, experienced the Proteus stumble. So I'm really glad that it's not just me.
It's not. And that's why you got to go back, too, because you kind of just, it clicks at a certain point. It's a different moment in time. For some people, it's after 1 second. For some people, it's after one session. But once you get that, then there's no going back. It's the kind of thing that it kind of becomes addicting in a way, because it's just, there's no sensation like it, where you're moving through, you feel like you're moving through mud or quicksand, right? As you increase the resistance. It's a neural experience that has extraordinary benefits, especially for the aging population too, as we're starting to get more into longevity. You've heard of sarcopenia before, right? The loss of muscle over time as you age. But powerpenia is now a new term. That's basically how power changes as you age. Power is a biomarker now. And so it's a really exciting moment in time now where strength and power are no longer confined to what has historically been the best athletes in the world and bodybuilders. It's now directly tied to the length of your life and the quality of your life. And so we've found things, we've got 1 billion data points, new normative data, users that are age 8 to age 98. We're putting out this state of power report, I think in the next 2 weeks, that reveals a number of these insights and findings, including how does it change as you age? And spoiler alert, one of the things we found are the movements that decline most rapidly as you age are rotational movements. If there's anything that you do as you get older, and it's not strength, it's actually speed. And that's the kind of thing where if walking is rotational, if you fall, you need to be able to quickly rotate to stop yourself. Those are those are not just most efficient, those are the ones that decline at the fastest rate. And so those are the movements to pay attention to as you get older.
Interestingly, 2 weeks ago, I walked out as a single, played with this group. Guy was 68 years old. And he said at one point, he goes, 3 years ago, I could hit my driver 245, 250. Now I'm struggling to get it 200. And I said, well, that's interesting because, we're similar in age. And are you doing any daily exercising, stretching, anything? And he goes, no, I guess I should, huh? Like, well, then why are you surprised you're losing distance at our age, right?
Yeah, and interestingly too, you actually keep strength for a long. Once you have foundational strength, you actually keep that for a long time. What you don't, and so you don't need to train it as much. Power, right? The ability to take that strength and generate speed. Power declines rapidly. That's just something that happens in like detraining. So it's one of those things. It's something you need to be training way more often, not just as you age, just for anyone, just a kind of an exercise science principle. So those are the kinds of movements that and types of training that you should be doing, and that's really what our kind of assessment component of the product is all about. Is it just identifies those things in a way that hasn't been possible before, and kind of delivers it in a way that's really consumable, understandable, and actionable. And I'm not sure, when you tried Proteus, did you actually go through a test or no? Because you did a performance test, or was it just a workout?
It was more of a demo and a workout. And I was very lucky because there was a young woman there who was a high school golf coach, and she was a beast. And so Sean had her, Kayla, do some of the movements for me. And it was like, okay, Fred, you try it. Right? And then Kayla comes on and is like, like, whoa, okay, now I understand what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
She was amazing.
If you're going to get tested, it's kind of like, remember those carnival games? You swing the sledgehammer as hard as you can.
Yeah, right.
It's like, that's what you're trying to do. It's meant to be for on the testing side of things. It sounds like you didn't get a full report, which I'll have to share with you after this, because it's such an incredible. It's like a fitness program vending machine in a way, but in a way that's hyper personalized with insane precision. And we've been working at this for years.
I was going to ask you, how did you get to this point? What brought you to developing this product? Is it a vision that you had, or were you something that you did as a kid, or were you inspired from something else?
A combination of things. I grew up outside of Boston, and I was an athlete.
Where?
I grew up in a town called Wellesley.
Oh, of course. Okay. My wife's from Brookline. Okay, go ahead.
From Brookline? Awesome.
Yeah.
I know it well. I lived in Brookline for a period after.
Coolidge
Corner, nice.
Nice shot.
Coolidge Corner. I lived in Cleveland Circle for 2 years or something after college, but it's not far from Coolidge Corner. So I grew up in Wellesley, and not a place where there's a prevalence of the thick Boston accent, but nevertheless I grew fond of it. But I grew up playing every sport imaginable. But my primary sport was soccer, though, and I had a really painful condition in my knee. It's called osteochondritis dissecans. It's just really, really painful. It's starting at age 9. So from age 9 to 14, I was in and out of physical therapy and training. And my, soccer career was just like up and down. And I distinctly remember walking out of a training session with one of my teammates. I'm coming back from this kind of, rehabbing this knee condition and getting into training. He's got this severe oblique strain, and we each had a sheet of paper that had the same training program on it. And to me, this just exposed, I think this is the beginning for me of realizing this lack of information that's easily accessible, especially around measurements. And when I was getting assessed, it was all isolated joints, isolated joint movements. And I struggled to kind of translate that to whole body movements and rotation and multi-planar movements, which mattered, to sport. It mattered to sport. So fast forward, number of years, I went to Vanderbilt, so the Nashville, and I went back to Boston. I was working a different career. I became super interested in, I studied economics and history, and then I got into engineering. And I was in a different career field in construction management, building, life science and biotech spaces. I got super interested in biometrics, and I started to see this emergence of all these connected fitness companies and technologies. And all of them, from my perspective, were around like digitizing an existing piece of equipment, right? Put a sensor on a bike, put a screen on a cable machine. And where I was seeing this kind of critical void in data around physical strength and power, I realized that to solve that problem, you actually need to create a whole new machine altogether, invent a resistance as force in all directions to be able to get these measurements and build software. And that was something that nobody was doing, because I think everyone had been thinking about that. It's like that Henry Ford moment of like, you've asked somebody what they want, they say a faster horse. It just requires like a total reimagination. So I got inspiration for the mechanical system from something that my dad invented at MIT in the early 90s.
Wow.
And he spun out of MIT. He's brilliant, still alive today, not involved in Proteus, but he's obviously a big cheerleader. But he spun out of MIT in the early 90s. And in the basement of my house in Wellesley growing up, he was like a mad scientist trying to build this contraption that he was trying to have this thing for simulating sporting movements, but it didn't do it didn't work. It didn't mechanically. It was a brilliant concept. It didn't have resistance. It couldn't have resistance. There was obviously no software. And it was kind of a show and tell type piece, but with a brilliant foundational element. And that's actually 20 years later, what I use to say, okay, wait a minute, if I can redesign this mechanically and make that work, provide resistance, I can use that to build software and data capabilities around it. And then I left my job in previous career in 2015, bootstrapped for 18 months, founded the company in 2016. And that was the beginnings of Proteus. And we basically spent 4 years in heavy R&D mode, really humble beginnings, me and 1 to 3 other people in like a windowless startup incubator type closet, building machines with my own hands and driving them around in a truck, trying to get somebody to, experience it, use it. And then, we started to get a lot of traction in the baseball space, and then quickly into golf adoption. And basically after, 4 years of, partnership with the Hospital for Special Surgery and these great, in kind of trainer endorsements that were all just organic, we have grown in the last 2 years about 20 times. And we now have adoption from, tens of thousands of individuals age 8 to 98, including Patrick Mahomes. John Rahm is a regular user. Spencer Tatum is trainers on our advisory board. Justin Verlander, Damian Lillard, Tony Ferguson, basically across all major sports, the list goes on. And this is all organic word of mouth growth. So it's not like we are venture backed, but we're not like, pumping artificial, dollars into like, spend to get like artificial marketing boosts. And it's all very much, this is the real deal. There's a lot of layers to it. And this is, we want to be very cautious about building the brand and the trust we have with customers, because there's a lot of noise in this space and a lot of gimmicky stuff. And this is the opposite of that. But you can easily be perceived as a gimmick because of how different it looks and appears. And so, we always just say like, well, talk to the real customers and users, and they'll tell you this is not a joke. This is going to be continue to grow at a really rapid pace.
So when you and your buddies your partners were developing this in the little cubicle there, how often were you able to reach out to your dad and say, we're kind of stuck at this spot here? Or what was your thought? Was he helpful and he had all this amazing insight for all the work that he had done?
It's a really good question. The answer is actually no, but
Wow.
not because of a lack of interest in wanting to. There's really two reasons. One is that what we were doing were stratospheres beyond what he imagined or were kind of capable of. So it's really interesting that where we are today is not possible without what he did, right? But at the same time, so like what we're doing is built off of that, but we're doing things that he couldn't possibly do or have done or conceived of. So it's this really interesting kind of like mutual relationship. So as I had to kind of figure it out, and also at the same time he has had a couple of strokes. He's actually doing his recovery has been really good.
Great.
But nevertheless, like everything that he remembered and had documented or not documented from the earlier years was just like out the window. So it was unbelievably challenging to first of all just figure out what the hell was he doing, and then how did he do XYZ things.
Sure.
It actually led me down some really bad roads because there were some things that he started to do that were not right, and it took me a while to figure out, oh, wait a minute, that was not the right direction. We need to go this way. And then we got very quickly to a point in time where like we were just doing things that were way beyond his capabilities, software, data,
But it must have been difficult for you to separate yourself from those original ideas. And luckily hopefully you had partners and colleagues there that can say, hey, I know what you're thinking, but hang on a secsecond.
Yeah.
We got to look at this from a different angle.
Totally. Yeah. It's one of the things that we are prideful of is, or I think that is an advantage for us, I should say, is that I'm an outsider in this space, right? I don't have a formal background in exercise science, in athletic training, in physical therapy. I am a homeschooled, right, to know definitely way more than the average person and enough to be very dangerous. But the thing is, I also, and the same is true as an engineer. But I think the benefit of that is when you combine that with, like, I don't have an ego. All I care about is this is an interest that turned into a passion, now an obsession. And aside from my wife and kids, this is my life. I love to be told you're wrong or don't do this and push the limits of it. And I listen. And that was part of the journey on the engineering side was I could bring very unique perspectives from a design standpoint and so forth and sketch things out on paper. And then I have our engineers kind of translate that into real life. And that's how my brain works in kind of 3 dimensions. The same is true on the exercise science side where I am able to think outside the box. But I will use we have an advisory board that's literally some of the best trainers in the world across all sports who check me. They check me on all these things, and I expect that. And sometimes I'll come up with something that they'll say, we actually have this very different than how it's been thought about before, but that works, right? So it's I think we've got a really talented team that is very prideful of our ability to not have an ego, customer first in all ways, and we are developing a really excellent, I think, reputation that's about we're the hardest working people in the business, the grittiest, scrappiest, and we're playing the long game here.
I know you've got a hard stop in just a couple minutes, so let's make these last 2 answers quickly. What do you see as the future for Proteus? The
future for Proteus, I think the vision that I see is that Proteus is going to become ubiquitous, especially the ultimate vision is we think it's going to be belongs in more places than a treadmill. From a physical footprint standpoint, we are feeling the market pull in all those directions that are showing the signals that is possible. We think this is going to become really, really widespread. The real future that we are most excited about is we have such a head start with this new data. This new normative data, 1 billion data points, years of capturing it and figuring out what it means and how to use it, how we work that into these software products to deliver basically diagnostics and automated programming at a level of specificity, accuracy, and precision that's not just never been possible before, produces incredible results. And that's basically the roadmap that we're on generally.
Awesome. And is this distributed internationally so far? Or are you just in the continental U.S.? Where are you?
U.S. and Canada.
Okay.
We have a.
How do we find where is one near us?
Good question. So go to our website and
ProteusMotion.com.
Proteus Motion.
Proteus. ProteusMotion.com.
That's correct. And there is a location finder map on that just shows our affiliate and ambassador sites. If anything, just tap the blue button that says get a demo. Say that if you're a facility owner, or say that you're an athlete looking for the nearest Proteus, you can kind of choose who you are, fill out your information, and we'll take you right to the right place. In terms of like resources and how this is used and who it's used for, Instagram and Twitter at Proteus Motions, great resources there. YouTube channel, all the above. So we're strong on the content side, and there's a lot of layers to Proteus. So we highly recommend taking the time to learn, and you'll be hearing much more about us, in the coming, weeks, months, years.
I have a feeling you're absolutely right about that prediction. We are going to hear a lot about it in the future. Congratulations, Sam. This has been an amazing education for us, and I wish you a lot of luck.
Thank you so much, Fred. I appreciate it.
I want to thank this week's Golf Smarter ambassador, Steve Young from Gerhardt, Oregon. As our newest Golf Smarter ambassador, Steve gave up his NFL broadcasting career. Oh, it's not that Steve Young? And I'm not the first person to make that bad joke? Okay, well, Steve took advantage of getting a free copy of Tony Manzoni's video of The Lost Fundamental. When you request to do an episode intro, you'll receive a choice of 3 free gifts, and that includes a private link to Tony's video of The Lost Fundamental, a glove and glove storage compartment from redroostergolf.com, the best online golf subscription service, and a box of premium flight path golf tees, a tee above all. So write to golfsmarterpodcast@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you with some simple instructions on what to do, what to say, and how to take advantage of your free gift. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for upcoming episodes, I'd love to hear from you. Maybe you need some more information and want to discuss our September Portugal adventure. Still love to hear from you. Write to golfsmarterpodcast@gmail.com or click on the Hey Fred button when you visit golfsmarter.com.